In 2006, a man sold $24.7 million worth of rare wine in a single auction, a world record at the time. He was spending $1 million a month on bottles, hosting tastings and pouring vintages most people in the wine world had never even seen in person. He built a reputation so untouchable that the biggest auction houses in New York fought to work with him. Collectors called his cellar the greatest on earth. But there was no cellar, no wine training, no French connections, and no legal right to even be in the country. He was mixing cheap California wine in his kitchen, gluing fake labels onto bottles, and selling them to billionaires who never thought to check. His real name was Rudy Kurniawan, born Jen Wang Huang in Indonesia. His family had money, they ran a beer distributorship back home, and he came to the US on a student visa in the late 90s. The allowance was real, but it was nowhere near enough to explain the kind of spending that came later. His asylum application was denied, he was ordered to leave, and he just didn't. By the time immigration caught up with him, he was already one of the most respected wine collectors in America. He came into the Los Angeles wine scene in the early 2000s and quickly became impossible to ignore. He was soft-spoken, generous, and had this quiet confidence that made powerful people want to be around him. At one gathering, he'd open a bottle of Romanée Conti worth upwards of $20,000, pour it for everyone, and then sit back while they argued over tasting notes. He showed so much obsession with Domaine de la Romanée Conti, the most sacred name in Burgundy. The collectors gave him the nickname Dr. Conti. And in a world where trust runs on taste and access, that nickname was worth more than a resume. This was a world where reputation mattered almost as much as what was in the bottle. Old Burgundy was notoriously hard to verify. Paperwork could be patchy. Provenance was often just a story someone told you, and the people buying at this level were trusting the room as much as the cork. If a bottle costs more than a car, and every rich person at the table is nodding like it's the real thing, most people stop asking uncomfortable questions. Rudy made himself the most trusted person in that room, and once that happened, the con got a lot easier. Those two auctions in 2006 went through Acker Merrill and Condit, the auction house that had become his main channel. The first sale alone brought in $10.6 million. And after the second one broke the record, Rudy wasn't just a collector anymore. He was the guy everyone else wanted to buy from. Every bottle that came out of his supposed cellar carried his name as a guarantee. Would you have spotted the catch? Behind the scenes, the work was precise. Prosecutors said Rudy was sourcing cheap but old wines, usually inexpensive Burgundy and Napa bottles with enough age to pass a first impression, and blending them to approximate the flavor profile of legendary vintages. He'd add the right corks, stamps, capsules, and all the little visual cues that suggest decades of aging in a prestigious French cellar. The FBI later estimated he may have sold as many as 12,000 counterfeit bottles over the years. The money funded a lifestyle in suburban Los Angeles that included a Lamborghini, luxury cars, designer clothing, and the kind of fine dining that made everything look like it belonged. He also used bogus high-end bottles as collateral to secure a $3 million loan from a finance company, which is a bold move when the collateral may have started life as a $15 bottle of Napa Pinot Noir. The cracks started showing before anyone connected them. In 2007, Christie's in Los Angeles pulled a consignment of supposed magnums of 1982 Chateau Le Pen after concluding the bottles were fake. That should have been a warning. But it became impossible to ignore in April 2008, when Laurent Ponceau showed up. Ponceau is the proprietor of Domaine Ponceau in Burgundy, and he noticed that a New York auction was listing supposed Ponceau wines from vintages his family's domain never even made, including a bottle labeled 1929, even though they didn't start estate bottling until 1934. So he flew from France to the auction and got the lots pulled. Imagine that room for a second. For fancy catalogs, serious money in the air. And then the actual winery owner shows up to say, no, that bottle cannot exist. That is the kind of moment that can change an entire industry. Those withdrawn lots were traced back to Rudy. Private investigators and federal agents started pulling the thread, and what they found wasn't one or two embarrassing mistakes, it was a pattern. Wines that didn't match production records, bottles with details that made no sense, and vintages that were supposedly from years before certain wineries even existed. Among the people who got burned was billionaire Bill Koch, who had bought extensively from Rudy, including a 1947 Petrus and bottles of 1934 Domaine de la Romanée-Conti at those 2006 auctions. Koch later estimated his counterfeit purchases at about $2.1 million. But Koch was not the kind of victim who files a complaint and moves on. He funded private investigations, hired experts to dig into provenance, and treated the whole thing like a personal war against fraud in a world that had gotten too comfortable with assumptions. He filed a lawsuit against Rudy in 2009 and eventually settled for $3 million in damages. On March 8, 2012, the FBI showed up at Rudy's house in Arcadia. Inside, agents found the whole operation laid bare. Partially completed bottles waiting to be finished. Handwritten notes listing which legendary vintages each batch was about to become. Stacks of labels, corks, stamps, and wax seals. It was a counterfeiting workshop that looked less like a criminal enterprise and more like a very organized craft project. The man who had built his identity around perfect taste was now standing in front of evidence from his own countertop. His trial took place in federal court in Manhattan, where the glamour of the auction world translated very badly into evidence tags and testimony. Collectors who had trusted him took the stand. Aubert de Villaine, the co-owner of Domaine de la Romanée-Conti itself, the estate Rudy had built his entire identity around, testified against him. Laurent Ponceau testified too. The image of the gifted insider started looking like something much simpler. A man who had figured out that rich people can be just as easy to fool as anyone else, as long as the story is expensive enough. On December 18, 2013, a jury convicted him on fraud charges, making him the first person ever tried and convicted for selling counterfeit wine in the United States. The judge called it a bold, grandiose, unscrupulous, but destined to fail con. On August 7, 2014, he was sentenced to 10 years, ordered to pay $28.4 million in restitution to 7 victims, and hit with a $20 million forfeiture judgment. He served about 7 years at a federal prison in Texas and was released in late 2020. Immigration took custody immediately, and in April 2021, he was deported to Indonesia on a commercial flight from Dallas. He reportedly tried to secure a first-class seat for the trip. He was denied. The man who had sold $24 million in wine at a single auction flew home in coach. And here's the part that makes this story different from most fraud cases. As of 2023, Rudy Kurniawan has reportedly been showing up at exclusive private dinners in Singapore, blending wines, counterfeiting bottles as a party trick, and letting guests compare his fakes to the originals. On multiple occasions, most of the guests preferred the fakes. The man who went to prison for fooling billionaires is apparently still fooling people. He just charges less for it now. Enjoyed this story? Leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. Now you know.